Friends, hello. This is Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the podcast where two writers sit down and just talk. That's all it is. Nothing more, nothing fancy, nothing planned, nothing organized. It's just me fucking thinking of questions to ask. But it's driven by my curiosity. I love other writers. I love talking about writing. I love exploring ideas. I love hearing people's kind of origin story. And you're going to love our guest today because he's got a great history of writing. And before I get to him, it's funny. I got an email from Buzzsprout, and Buzzsprout is a service that I use to upload all of the podcasts. So you can consume these podcasts either through, the place, wherever place you get your podcast, or you can watch them if you like the video part of it, either on my website or my YouTube channel. But Buzzsprout is what kind of sends the episodes out to all the services like Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all that good stuff. And they gave me a little year in review, and it was kind of interesting because I have been doing this. I'm entering my 6th year of doing this podcast. Started during the pandemic. And so I have 5 years behind me, 200 something episodes published at this point. Obviously, I do about 50 or so a year. I usually record about once a week. And apparently, I have been listened to in 100 countries and over 1,600 cities. And I'm in the top 50% of all Buzzsprout podcasts. So that's cool. I don't do this. I'm clearly not making money doing this. I love doing this. I love talking to writers. Like I said, it's great because it also builds my community. I don't have a Patreon. I don't have ads. So I just do it because it's fun, which is why I try to limit it to just once a week. But I'm really dedicated to it. So it's nice to see that some of these numbers are validating my efforts and the production that myself and my team put into this. So that is awesome. All right, friends. Today, as you could see in the show notes, I talked to the great Gregg Hurwitz. So Gregg, so if you don't know Gregg, of course you know Gregg. If you're a suspense thriller reader at all, you know Gregg Hurwitz. But just to recap, he is the New York Times and #1 internationally best-selling author of 27 thrillers, including the Orphan X series. He's won all sorts of different awards, and he's been published in 33 languages. He's the co-president of International Thriller Writers, and he's also a Hollywood guy. He's written screenplays and television scripts, and comics as well. So he has done a lot. He has done a lot. Not only in the novel writing industry, but in Hollywood as well. And he started out, his first book he wrote when he was 19. So we get into this in the discussion, but he had this self-awareness, combined with, as he phrased it, ignorance and arrogance as a 19-year-old, like, this is what I want to do. I don't want to do anything else. How can I figure out how to make enough money to write every day? How can I figure out what kind of schooling is going to give me the best ability to break into publishing? And he did. He figured his shit out. He's just been, he won't probably admit this, but he's been on a very strong trajectory ever since the publication of his first novel. And his next novel coming out, which should be out by the time this airs in February 2026, is the next novel in the Orphan X series called Antihero. So he's very productive. He's writing a lot, and he's just got a lot of great insight. So we didn't really go through his whole trajectory as a published writer as much as we just talked about how he views writing, how he views, his interest in it, some great advice for aspiring writers out there. We talked a lot about feedback and who you listen to and who you don't listen to. And he's just got a very confident approach to his writing. We also talked about confidence quite a bit and kind of how difficult it is to gain confidence as a writer, but how important it is to have that confidence because that is going to protect your voice more than anything else. I had the pleasure of interviewing Gregg at the Ohio Book Festival last summer. I knew him a little bit through ITW, but it was great to be able to sit down and pick his brain about writing even more. This is a great episode. And then we do a great storytelling at the end where he he just takes the ball and runs with it. He's awesome at it. You could tell he's done this before. This is my conversation with Gregg Hurwitz.
What book is it? It's the 11th Orphan X, and I think it's my 27th novel. Let me look. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 27. 27th novel.
So, did you ever imagine that you'd have to fucking remember how many novels you wrote and got published? I mean,
No, it's
that's like
pretty.
that's like a dream for somebody who's like trying to like just break in, you know?
It's so good. It's such a blessing, dude. It's just
Yeah,
crazy. I mean, I remember when I got my first, draft done. It was a super shitty, rough draft. I was in college still. And I remember at the time literally thinking if somebody would just pay me $2,500 a month for the rest of my life and I could rent a studio
that would be it.
and just type and just write, that's all I'd want to do. So I love
Right.
the fact that I get to kind of produce and create.
Right.
It's amazing.
It's yeah, well, I always think about this. You're the director of your own vision. I was in corporate America for a long time and I loved it. I loved my job. I got paid well and I was an executive, but ultimately when it boils down to it's like you are working for somebody else's vision. And then when you're writing, it's just like for better or for worse, this is coming from me. And there's something very humbling about that, I think.
Yeah, well, like a lot of things, it's both humbling and empowering. It's your
Yeah.
neck on the chopping block. If the
Yeah.
book sucks, you can't blame the choreographer,
Right, right,
And
right.
so, yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of it. For me, I came at it a little differently. It was less about, I would say, control of that or being able to control the vision wasn't necessarily the top thing in my value hierarchy. It was that I wanted to figure out a life where I can spend as much time as I possibly can doing only the things I want to do.
Right. Well, and that's a very, so that's why I want to kind of talk through a little bit because you came at this at a very young age. So you didn't necessarily have the context of I've spent decades doing something else and now I've dabbled in writing and now I find out this it's the thing. You were like gung ho, this is what I want to do, which is fairly self-aware at a young age, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of challenges certainly in trying to make a living as a professional writer. I mean, the number of people in the history of the world who can do that. We have structures in place now that some of us can actually make a living. It's sort of a miracle to figure that out and make it work and to reach an audience. And I'd say the benefit that I had was knowing it's the only thing I wanted to do. I had no backup plan. I mean, there was nothing else that was going to
Burn
happen
the
for.
boats.
Yeah, I burned all the boats. I burned all the bridges. I started my first novel. I was 19.
Yeah.
Undergrad, I studied English and psychology because I thought that was the most interesting double major and the one that would give me the biggest launch into writing a novel.
Hmm.
And I started and wrote a, super shitty rough draft the summer before and after my junior and senior year of college, and then just rewrote it 16 times. I mean, I just was determined to do that and to learn it as best as I could.
Yeah, I mean, and you're approaching it like a homework project, right? And it feels like, and this is why I'm kind of interested in you, is because it feels like you develop this attitude that I think you can usually ascribe to, just speaking from personal experience, like 50-year-olds, like where you get to the point of like, it takes a long time for most people to figure out what it is that makes them full, you know?
Hmm.
And to not only, and I'm not just kissing your ass here, I'm kind of fascinated by not only to have that awareness, but then to be um kind of methodological about it, and you're like approaching it like, okay, these are the majors that are going to help me out. I'm going to rewrite this 16 times because it's the only way it's going to get better. I'm going to be aware that this is still probably going to be shitty no matter what I do because I'm starting out, and knowing that there's a long slog, maybe not as long for you as some people, but so did you get that first book published? Was that your first book?
I was super fortunate. I went off. I got a fellowship or a paid scholarship to go to England. I studied Shakespearean tragedy for a year, mostly because I needed a very practical degree to enter the job force in case my
Hmm.
vision of becoming a
Hmm.
novelist didn't pan off. But I was furiously rewriting it. And I would say part of that was for me, I haven't met any writers who are successful where it isn't a compulsion for them. It was a
100%.
compulsion for me.
Right.
And I think what happened was I had the awareness to put discipline in place to approach it that way, but the
Yeah.
approach wasn't from that. That was like
Right.
the scaffolding that I needed to do what I wanted to do the most. And I just knew it would be a lot of hard work and discipline. And it was
Right.
very hard for me to figure it out early.
Of course. And it's not like you had the awareness of like, okay, this is how I'm going to make my money. You had the awareness of this is what I want to do. And there's something about manifestation that's kind of embedded in all of this of just like, I'm a writer. This is what I do. And I know it's really hard to make a living in it. And maybe it was even, maybe it's harder now. I don't know. But this is where I'm putting all of my mental energy. And if I assume I'm a writer, all the other chips will fall into place eventually. I mean, again, probably not thinking it through that much, but that's kind of what
No,
was
yeah, I mean that's a good encapsulation. At the time, all I thought was I want to write, how do I get as many hours possible writing every day?
right.
And even when I sold my first book, it was very interesting. Like I didn't go buy a nice car, I didn't go do any of that. I literally thought, how do I budget if I break this apart to not live above that, even that 2,500 a month threshold? Like so that I have as many months in a row that I can just write full time. I mean,
Right.
I viewed money almost just as gasoline for the tank for
Right.
how far I could go
Right.
with
Of
it.
course.
Yeah. So it was, it's really is like an illness writing. And I don't mean it preciously, but I mean it's a sublimation of a compulsion into something that can be beautiful and helpful to other people. But it's like it is a drive that needs to be expressed. And so
Yeah, and I think that's right. And I think that drive is different for every writer. I think for me, it's because I don't outline, it's this sense of problem solving. Like I get so excited about trying to, work my way out of a paper bag every day. And that's what's exciting for me. Like, what happens? How do we get out of this? Other people, they're just constantly thinking of their stories, and it's all that they can think about. For me, I think of my stories when I sit down and write, and then I kind of disengage pretty easily. Where do you fall on that spectrum?
hmm. I mean, it changes a lot. It's definitely not overly outlined. I've always had sort of flexible outlines that are always growing and changing and moving.
Yeah.
It changed a little bit. I wrote my first three books with like no outline and just kind of a rough shape of things, and they were all a mess. And then I have more and more notes now. And now it's very interesting because I'm approaching this new book that I'm working on right now very differently. It's much more like moving around. It's kind of like seeing that figure in the block of stone that you're carving out.
Yeah.
Like I'm kind of just chiseling and working around, and I'm freeing myself, but I have pages and pages and pages of notes. I mean,
Yeah.
just I've 70 pages of bullet points all around it, and they're shaped in different ways,
Yeah.
but I'm like picking up different tools and kind of embellishing it. And in the past, it has been more structured.
Yeah. I mean, and it's funny because I'm kind of not quite 70 pages of notes, but when I have an idea, I throw it into the scrap document. And then it obviously grows over time as you're working through stuff. And, you look at 70 pages of notes, and I'm sure many of those notes are in conflict with one another, and you can't obviously use all of them. And I think you just kind of hope your subconscious is working through all of that and trying to, and picking up on the ones that are going to tell the best story, because you must go back and look at those 70 pages and be like, oh, I totally forgot about this one idea that I had.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I've been working on the book long enough now that I have a handle on it. But at the
Yeah.
beginning, it's like that completely. Like I'll scroll down and have 2 pages where I'm like, wait, none of this is going to go in the book,
Right.
even.
Right.
Like this was just like I like character dialogue or snippets of something or an action scene without a place. And so as I, the further that I progress, the more that that gets kind of refined, and so then I know what I'm picking up more. I have a better sense of what's in the now 60 pages. For a long time it grows and bloats, and I'm convinced I'm going to write a Tolstoy length novel, and then it finally starts to compress
And
towards
you
the end.
probably end up hitting that word count that's probably pretty consistent throughout all, I don't know. For me, every time I write a book, the first draft is always 85 to 87,000 words. I'm not trying to hit that mark. It's just
Perfect,
how it
man.
happens. And I'm like, this is great. And editing might mean cutting 20 and adding 19 or whatever. But
Hmm.
it just happens like that. And again, I think that's maybe the subconscious coming into play. Does that process differ for you, whether you're writing a series versus a standalone?
I don't know. It's been a while since I wrote a standalone. I mean, but no, I have a novella coming out this year, my first novella that I've written called The Delivery.
Okay.
And that one I kind of sat and wrote out with a much rougher shape of an outline. That was really fun.
So
But no, I
defining like
tend
35, 40,000 words, something like that.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but no, it is weird. A lot of times it has its own shape. I usually finish a bit long. I'll finish between 105 and 115, maybe 20,000 words,
Okay.
and then pare back. Screenplays too. I'll come in with a screenplay, 127 pages.
Yeah.
Then you try and lop it down to 117. But I've never come in double. I've never come in,
Right.
way over. And there's a weird thing that it sort of does wind up shaping, even though every time I question whether it will.
Because you have a sense, I think, and I think particularly once we start talking about, suspense and thrillers, I think you definitely start to get this assumption or this gauge of like, oh my God, they haven't done anything in 3 chapters. They need to move. Something needs to happen. There's too much introspection. And I think you start paring that down just naturally over time as a writer. That's just the muscle at work, I think.
Hmm. I think that's
Um,
right.
so I'm curious to know, because you started publishing, many years ago, what is your perspective on how the market has changed in ways we can't even get into all of them since that time. What are some of the challenges, or maybe what are some of the blessings that you've seen in terms of market shifts and your own writing?
It's so wild because I'm 52. I think, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
52 now, which isn't young, but it's certainly not, aged.
right.
And it's funny to look back at the beginning of my career and to see that it was a completely different world.
Totally different.
Like book tours going everywhere. I remember going to signing with Borders and Barnes and Noble. I remember when
Right,
audiobooks were big, cracked plastic tape decks for
right,
truckers mostly.
right,
I remember the first ebook, and everybody was like, well, what's going to happen here with ebooks? Is that crazy? What's the royalty? Can't people steal it?
right.
I mean,
Pre-Amazon.
pre all that stuff,
Yeah,
before I remember when Amazon first put up reviews by readers, and we were like, what is this? Like any reviewer can, and so it's very wild seeing that the nature of book tours has changed.
yeah,
We've seen audio explode. That's been great. Ebooks
yeah,
have exploded. And I think there's as much good as bad. Any change brings with it as much. The unknown always has equal parts opportunity as it does to threat, and
yeah.
so I think it's important to keep geared towards that
Right.
as much as we can, or to remember that, since we tend to gear towards what the old is. But it's a very different time. There's no question about it.
I wonder. I mean, I feel like what I'm seeing, and I started writing in 2003, but I didn't publish till 2012. But I was going through agents, trying to find agents with snail mail and all that fun stuff back then. I, it feels like it's much harder now to get heard, to get noticed, whether it's an agent or even if you're self-publishing to get noticed because of just the volume. that's out there, the volume that agents are receiving because how easy it is now to shotgun query everything. Have you heard these kinds of things and do you feel like it's harder to get published now than ever?
Well, it's hard for me to say because I'm not the one
Right,
breaking in anymore. I
right.
mean, one of my dear friends is Christopher Rice, Anne Rice's son.
Yeah.
And he has this great line where somebody, every time you do an event, we've done a lot of events together, but someone raised their hand, they go, "How do you get to age it?" And Chris said very self-effacingly, he's like, "Have Anne Rice be your mother." And what was so funny is Chris has had an extraordinary career. Maybe that helped for the first or the second book. It didn't help for the next, half dozen on. But everyone has a different way of entry, and they all are seemingly impossible. Like if you sat everyone down at Thriller Fest and you
Yeah.
said, "Everyone raise your hand and tell the story about how you got published," it's usually through a completely unlikely series of events. And the
Right.
same is true of me. Like it's not really duplicatable.
Right.
So I think whenever you're going after something, I mean, I was thinking on the screenplay side, I've written some screenplays as well. The number of writers in Hollywood who are working and making a living are about the same number as people who get paid in the NFL. I mean, we're
Wow.
talking about extremely difficult
Right.
fields. It's why I always laugh when people are like, "Oh, I really want to, I'm doing XYZ, but like, I think I'll be a novelist." And it was like, "Yeah, have it as a backup plan, like becoming a TV star. That should be easy." I mean, like what we're
Right.
seeking to do is very, very difficult. And I think that part of it is rather than getting upset or overwhelmed. I mean, look, when I started, I was still young enough and dumb enough to just do it and
Right.
assume that something would happen. I didn't know how hard it was. I didn't know all the odds. And so in some ways I was insulated by the, arrogance, naivete of youth.
Yeah.
But, you just, if you view it as a higher threshold of responsibility, meaning I have to be that much better, I think that's the way to do it. Just be as good as you possibly can. The circumstances have always been difficult. If we reach back 100 years or 200 or 500, the odds that you'd even be able to get paid to do something like this or shrink to near zero.
Yeah.
And so have at it. No one's waiting around for us to create. It's our job to create and then to try and make something that is as close to undeniable as possible.
Totally. And, personally, I started writing when 22 years ago when I was 33 and I had a full-time job. And I just, you start writing, and you're like, this is what I want to do. And I know I'm not very good at it, but this is what I want to do. So you have to find the practicality of like, I'm not going to, yeah, I'm a supporter. I'm not going to just leave everything and hope at that age. So you figure out how to write and have a full-time job and raise a family. And people think that this insurmountable thing. And it's not. It's hard, but anything worth doing is hard.
Right. And it's not as hard as digging ditches every day. So,
100%. And it's taken me 20 years to break out, and you become very grateful for it, but you also have this perspective of thank God I didn't quit my day job back then, because you also only control so much. You're coming from a place where you broke in early and established a great name and brand and obviously great writing and characters people want to follow. But there's also this thing where like who knows if the next book is going to sell for a lot of authors, and there's no straight line for most people. So
Yeah, I
there's
think only Michael Connolly has had the straight line up.
that's
Mike's first book was great. He just he kept the same team and he had a very slow, steady build. And good on him. There's not a nicer guy it could happen to. Like a lot of authors, I had a lot of ups and downs, and this one did really well, then this one did fair, then this one did disastrously, and then
right.
this one did great. And, it's bumpy, until I was going to say until you're over the threshold, but you never know if that's where you're just going to live forever. But, things get steadier in success, at times. And that is something to be very grateful for and to not forget.
And I would assume, and this is spoken a little bit out of ignorance because I've only written I have my 11th is coming out, but I've only written standalones. I would assume there's if you have a series that after two, three, four books in the series, you can look at it and say, this is doing pretty well. This is fairly established. This has a following. There is some kind of I don't know, ability to budget maybe a little bit as you're writing series. Like you can count on maybe a minimum readership for every book in this series. Is that an ignorant statement or is that fairly true?
I think once a series is consistent, I mean, publishers like series because, it's if the overall, I'm going to say brand, it's a term I don't like, of
Yeah,
that series hits and holds, it's a little bit more regular. But I mean, look at Crichton did well for himself. Early Grisham, there wasn't a series.
right.
If you look at Michael Crichton, right? I mean, he
Yeah,
was blowing the doors off stuff. Stephen King,
right.
there was no
Right.
series.
Right.
I mean, so I think everyone creates their own version of kind of magic
Yeah.
that happens or doesn't happen. There's plenty of failed series out there, right? There's plenty of series that got the 2 book offer and then fell off a cliff.
Right.
And so I don't think anything's a guarantee of it. I think the only guarantee is that if you stay as alive and engaged in the writing itself and you put everything into it and you follow the most that you care about to make it living, breathing, authentic writing, then that tends to attract rather than repel people. And then you can try and build a critical mass from there. But it's the only thing we can control. And a lot of writers, we have a tendency to focus more and more and more on like marketing or publicity. And what you don't want to do is start putting 50%, 70% of your time into the 5% that you think you can control.
Right. Right. That's
Everything's about
absolutely
that
true.
writing.
And I think along that same track, you have a lot of because I coach writing as well, and I'm seeing writers who, I mean, I love when they reach out and they want to, they want feedback, but I see a lot of writers who are kind of learning in a vacuum, and they're not in critique groups. They're not getting, you know, objective feedback on their manuscripts, and they're wondering why it's not selling. And I think such a big part of being a writer is having that vulnerability to say, yeah, tear me apart because I don't know if and I still feel that way. I still feel, yeah, I write a novel. I'm like, I don't know if it's any good. I need my agent, my editor to tell me because at this point I have confidence over some things and other things that I'm still in the dark a little bit. What is your thought on that?
Well, I think that especially, I think one has to be careful of too many critiques and too many voices,
Yeah,
especially early on when you're quite malleable.
right,
I mean, my rule was to find the people who I thought were the most insightful in their notes
right.
and the most brilliant, and where there was a track record of the notes feeling objective. There
Right.
are some things, people can always say, look, it's subjective, it's your opinion, it's creative, but things are better objectively and things can be worse. And that's not every note, but there are people who give reactions and reads that are tangible. And sometimes they're not the most polite or kind people because they're high in trait disagreeableness and they're telling you what's wrong.
Right.
And so I learned early on, my rule was not to listen to too many people, but
Yeah.
once I trust somebody, to really do my best to listen to everything that they say. And I
Right.
have I have the best agent in the world right now. I have great editors here in the US and in the UK. And I have some subject matter experts. And when I really listen to it. And, there's another trick I think you learn as a writer when you get a note. And I'd say I learned this better in Hollywood, which is the note itself isn't always correct, right? I might get a note on page 90 of a screenplay where they say, oh my God, this is really slowed down. And I'll look at page 90 and think, no, it hasn't. It's whipping along.
Right.
But what really happened was on page 80, things slowed down too much. And that's just where they realized it and wrote it down,
Right.
right? And so part of it is to also having being capable of trying to excavate the hidden editorial anxiety, right? Something bugged them. They didn't like something here. What are they trying to say, however imperfectly,
Right.
rather than how do I win the argument over the note?
And that's, for those who are writing for a long time before they get published, the ability to identify those people who are voices that give them feedback that is not only brilliant but resonates. That's a learned skill. That doesn't because for the person who's in a critique group, that is the immediate reaction is like you're taking notes from five people going around giving comments, and you look down and you realize like they might be in conflict with each other, these notes, and you have to find that voice that just hits you, and it's a little bit indefinable when that happens, but you find yourself leaning in and listening and like, because it speaks to you. It's just something you couldn't see yourself. But once they say, you're like, oh my God, yes, totally, that makes sense. For me, that's how it evolved with critique groups, and it might just be one person that you're listening to, and you're ignoring literally everybody else.
Well, the voice that you need to listen to above all else, absolutely, is you have to have the confidence for your own voice to prevail.
Yeah,
Like if I was, and I guarded it harder and perhaps arrogantly when I was younger, but like when someone was really smart, I would listen because they just would swat away my resistance. But I was also a kid. I mean, I was 20, 21 years old taking notes on stuff, but I was much more guarded with it. And part of that was the odds that you'll listen to five people and all of them will have something to say that's what's going to uniquely make your book great and sell are incredibly low. I mean, you
right,
can't put five people in a room and have them all
right,
have that level of skill and insight and commerciality. And it's very unlikely.
right,
We tend to evolve where we're very nice and democratic about feedback and input, but you can't take a whole bunch of input because your job is to figure out the story that is your story that is told in a way that only you can tell it.
right.
And I think the voices that I react to, at least, they've tended to be voices that are critical, that are telling me things that I already knew but was hiding from myself.
Right.
Like, this is sort of a bullshitty way to fudge this action scene to make it make sense. Or
Right.
I know the third act is really long and it needs to cut down, but I'm in love with all the words of it. Like, they're telling something that is almost an act of willful blindness on my part not to see.
Right.
Or they're saying something that is like opening a different doorway for my own voice in my own work,
Yeah.
not their note for how they think a mystery should function.
Yeah.
And it's because you want the furtherance of your own vision, your own
Right.
story. That's what you want.
Right.
And
And
everyone else around you should want that for you. And when you give notes to other people, you should want that for the people you're giving notes to. You don't want them to write your story
right.
or a more commercial story or something that's the way that you think it should be done. You want them to be the maximized version of themselves because that's the only thing that will be authentic,
Yeah.
and only authentic voices will stand out.
Yeah. The worst advice I think you can get from people reading your manuscript is you should do this instead. It should be, this is how I absorbed this. This is how I took this. This is how it made me feel. This is how I interpreted it, for better, or for worse. At least for me, that works. But when someone tells you, he should really be doing this instead, that often is, again, to your point, the story that they want to tell. But it sounds like you mentioned the word confidence, which is such a tricky thing with writers, right? Like, writers exist in a world of low self-esteem for the most part. But that confidence is the only thing that's going to get you over the hump, because it is being true to yourself ultimately. You said that you kind of developed that early in your writing career. What How did that manifest itself? Did that manifest itself in a sense of like you were just not agreeing with your editors, or were you having standoffs, or how were you being true to your voice while still?
Well, I would say I had a bad but useful version of it early. Like most of our skills, right? Every blessing has a curse,
Of
right?
course,
And
yeah.
so it's all about how we turn the dial on these things. And confidence can be close to overconfidence. I think when people gave me notes who were more amateur-y, let's just say,
Yeah.
I was like, no, I'm not going to change it that way. I don't want to do it that way. I was very protective that way and felt like I had an idea. I mean, look, I never took a writing class or was in a critique group or did any of that stuff or read a book on writing. I just read, 5,000 novels. I just loved novels and I
Right.
was trying to write all the time. And so I was very guarded until somebody spoke up to me and could say things. I had an early editor who I worked with who was amazing. He was first my agent and then but he worked very editorially. And he was just brutal on stuff. It was brutal notes. They were very sharp. He was sharper than me. I couldn't out argue it. Like it was just there. And then I think there's a period of time where perhaps you're guarding a little bit more. And now I think in some ways I have more confidence. I'm very open to notes. It's like, what do you think didn't work? It just doesn't phase me. I'm not trying to like prove or hold on too tight. And so I think there's an evolution of it, but like all things, if you turn a dial on confidence, it's not useful. It's overly confident or becomes arrogant or you're missing things. So you want to have sort of a quiet inner faith in yourself and your writing is probably a better way to put it. I think that's what I'm always trying to work towards. And you never have it all the way,
No,
but
of
if
course.
you can live in there more and more.
It's an evolution. And I think that's probably the most difficult thing for any writer to develop is that inner belief in themselves and the understanding that you're going to change as a writer. And I've said this a million times on my podcast, but I can look back on my books and feel like my fifth published book. I'm like, I can look back and say, oh, I think that's where I found my voice. But it took
You
five.
better change. Can you imagine doing a job or something you love and not changing in it? I mean,
No,
that's a
no. And
nightmare.
that doesn't always mean you get better. It means you're changing. It means you're trying different things. And I think you're trying to find, and when we talk about voice, you're trying to find what just, I think, in my opinion, what just comes out of you most naturally. What's your way of writing? And it takes, I think, hundreds of thousands of words to figure that out. Because I think we all start by reading a lot of books and say, well, I guess this is how books work. So let me emulate this. And that's fine, but it's shitty. And then you kind of do more and more. And then things just start to change over time. Finally, you're like, oh, this feels better coming out of me when I write it this way. Can you look back and say like, oh my God, I was like such a different writer back in books 3, 4, and 7.
Oh, it's incredible. It's like anything. Think back to anything you thought or said or did when you were 19,
Right.
right? It's like I just happen to have some of that, as part of the public record at this point. Or when you're mid 20s compared to mid 30s, compared to 40, compared to 50. I mean, you're
Right.
a different human. I mean,
Right.
you want to be, I think.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
writing reflects that. The way you write about people and relationships and action and violence and everything should be evolving all the time. I mean, if as a writer, as an artist, you're trying to stay open to the world and open to yourself and open to other people, it should be constantly moving towards greater depth and greater elegance in the writing.
Yeah. And I think also me, I don't know. I don't know if this is true or not because I don't totally believe in this, but I think as I get older, I think when I write, I'm making a message to myself more than anything else. But there's like, this is what this book is about. And I don't necessarily need that message to be totally broadcast or totally understood by everybody. But to me, it's very meaningful. Where I think when I was younger, it was just like, all right, what happens next? Like, what does he do now? And now it's more thematic. I would say even not to the point of being didactic about it, but hopefully being understated enough. But I see that as I get older, it's like, yeah, I want to talk about the patriarchy or whatever I want to talk about, but it's all going to be expressed through this 5-hour home invasion novel, you know? So we are constantly evolving and we're constantly thinking of new things, but we still have to think about what people want to read. And
Mhm.
that's a moving target as well. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about community in the sense that obviously you're co-president of ITW, you're very involved in organizations which probably weren't even around when you first started writing and publishing. Certainly ITW wasn't. um, so you're obviously a big believer in giving back and establishing a community of writing colleagues and friends. Do you find that that's I mean, I know it's important. Has it increased in importance, or is it still? Can someone still just sit in their cabin in the woods and bang out, bang out a novel and be successful and never talk to anyone?
Yeah, I think people can still do that. I mean, for me, part of why I'm more involved now is I didn't have or know any of this when my first book came out. I mean, I
Right.
didn't know any group, I didn't know any novelists. Um, I'd never met anybody even, until I sold the book and things were starting to get a little bit serious. And a lot of why I do some things to help now is because I'm just so grateful for the people who stepped up at different times along the way There's people who blurb me. I mean, everybody blurb me at different times. I mean,
Yeah.
Lee Child and Mike Conley and T. Jefferson Parker and Robert Crace and like good on the list, Baldacci,
Yeah.
Sue Grafton. I mean, it's just it's amazing when people have done that and very slowly, like you meet somebody and then you're like, oh my gosh, they're a real name and they can blurb me on something. I just didn't have access to any of that coming up. And so it's incredibly important for me to make that part easier because I do think that the marketing and promotion side is it's more tempestuous now.
Yeah.
And so with ITW, International Thriller Writers with Thriller Fest, I mean, people can come and they meet a bunch of writers in one place at the bar. There's all kinds of panels. You meet agents, you meet editors, you meet publishers, you meet publicists. Everybody's there. And it's very much set up with a good crew of people who are all doing it for the right reasons, that they're grateful in their careers and they want to give things back.
Yeah.
And we've kept the culture that way. You know, I was there when it was founded by Gail Linz,
Yeah.
who is
Yeah. Yeah.
amazing, and David Morrell. I mean, I was at
Right.
that first meeting. And you know, when I came in and took over, my first co-president was Heather Graham. You'll be hard pressed to find a more lovely human being on the
Right.
planet than Heather. You know, now Lisa Unger's been my co-president. But the board and the crew and the people around there, it's we've managed to keep it a very pure venture. It's to celebrate and support writers. That's it.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud of the work that the organization has done. We've had a lot of people come up through the ranks. We've had a lot of debut authors. We
Yeah.
do a lot of stuff to try and help people who are stuck in the mid list, try and figure out how to, you know, move upward from there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I mostly do it because I feel like I'm in a position where I can be really helpful to people, and the other people in the organization are it's an amazing crew. It really is.
I mean, yeah, I work with Bob Dugoni and Elena Hartwell with the debuts, and because I remember my experience as a debut, I just couldn't believe that this organization like gave so much attention and put on this massive breakfast attended by hundreds for these lowly debut authors. And I love working with the debuts because you're giving back to what gave to you so much, and it is an amazing organization.
And we've had great people come up through that debut class, you know, and then you see
Totally.
them starting to help people behind them, and you just realize that you're doing good stuff, you
Right.
know.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get to the storytelling, I just want to ask, with 27 published books, the movies, the screenplays, where are your challenges in terms of, I can tell just from talking to you and knowing you a little bit, the fire is burning bright in you, and that doesn't seem to be an issue. But are there issues in terms of like, I don't want to do this thing anymore, I want to do that thing, or I want to try something different, and I'm getting pushback from that? Or is it just like, man, I'm just full steam ahead as always?
It's funny, we're sort of full circle here at the end of the interview where we started, which is, you know,
Yeah,
I try to not do anything that I don't want to do.
right.
You know, and it's a pretty good rule. Like there's
Yeah,
some things you
no,
have to do, especially early on. Like I remember it's funny you were talking about mailing the books physically. And I
mhm,
remember that when I had to like copy a new draft and mail it, and it was
right,
like, you know, $25 at Kinko's, and you don't
right,
have $25 because you're a
right,
broke ass writer. You know, there's stuff you have to do till you get to a place that you don't. But people don't always realize quickly or in real time what things they cannot do. I think anytime you're writing and putting your attention in places that are bad, in some ways you're dissipating your attention and your focus and your talent.
yep,
And so, no, I mean, the fire for me is very bright. You know, I mean, I've always loved writing. I've loved the actual act of writing. You know, I
yeah,
meet a lot of people who want to be writers. I meet very few who want to write. I
right.
always wanted to
Because it's
write.
hard.
Yeah, it's hard, but there's nothing like it when it's going well.
Yeah, yeah,
And so, you know, if screenplays, like if there's too much bullshit back and forth happening on in a particular deal on the Hollywood front, I just won't do it now. Or I'll
yeah,
just say, no, I'm not going to do that
yeah,
way, you know,
yeah,
and you know, then you wind up on doing fewer and fewer things that you don't want to do. There's a
right.
lot of busy work and bureaucracy that can creep in at life everywhere now more than ever. And that's not specific just to writing in our profession. It sort of is everywhere.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important that we guard our time because being an artist, it's like being an athlete. You have to be selfish with your
Right.
time in certain ways.
Right.
Because no one's going to walk into if you're a heart surgeon in the middle of your surgery and ask you 50 questions or have
Right.
you do
Right.
errands. So we
Right.
have to guard that time in a lot of ways. And a
And
lot
time
of
is limited. So
time is limited, and people who are close to that process sometimes will have a lot of engagement that can suck away hours and minutes. And, so it's important to keep the focus there.
yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to wrap up. Before we do, we're going to do our quick storytelling. I've picked this. I do it this at the end of every episode. So I've done this 200 plus times and it never gets any easier. But I picked three books at random off my bookshelf. You're going to pick one of those books. We're going to choose a random sentence from a random page. I'm going to read that sentence, and that'll be the first sentence in like a 2 minute long short story. So I'll read that sentence. You give me the next sentence or two that comes to your head. I'll do a sentence or two, and when it's totally off the rails, we'll call it. So I've got Kent Kruger's Fox Creek, Catch 22, and Angie Kim's Happiness Falls.
Catch
So
22.
yeah, I kind of figured you were going to go Catch 22. Give me a number between 1 and 416.
10.
All right. It's probably something to do with Yossarian. All right. I'm just going to read this. It's a it's a piece of dialogue. You can do whatever you want with it. Nobody's trying to poison you.
The question hidden beneath the non-question, of course, was would he consent to drinking the glass before him?
He was too smart to do that. I know he had seen The Princess Bride. He knew the backwards logic that I was trying to achieve. But still, he leaned down and sniffed the scepter.
Aware that the rat-like gestures he was making reeked of paranoia, he hemmed himself back in and checked his nonverbal tells, folding his hands neatly on the table before him and leaning back. It could be that he was paranoid. In fact, the woman across from him had no reason to poison him, but yet he wasn't sure why they had brought him here to this small, featureless room, sitting at the small, featureless desk.
He struck a pose as comfortably as he could, tried to relax all of his muscles, and as casually as he could, he slid his hand beneath the table and searched the underbelly of it, knowing that if he knew this person, if he knew her as well as he thought he did, there would be something taped there.
There was nothing. The surface is flat as a baby's bottom. So instead, he rose abruptly, bracing both manacled hands against the bottom of the table and flipped it over. The glass flew into her face, the liquid striking, and there was something of a sizzling about the eyes and the moistness of her mouth as she fell back against the wall, seizing violently.
I think we have to end it there because I've never had a story ended with seizing violently. So that's excellent. And I was thinking after he threw the table over, there was something under there, but it was on her side, but he viewed it. But that was good, man. You're good at this.
All right. Well, you are too. You've had 200 episodes of practice, so I'd expect you to be good.
Well,
You have no excuse if you weren't at this point.
the funny thing though it is you do react, it's improv, right? So it's yes and you react to the person you're doing it with. And if you're not getting anything, you obviously have to abandon any conception you have of where the story is going to go. But if you're really not getting anything from the person, it really gets hard. Like it gets hard for you. You can't fill in their blanks for them.
Mm.
And so I've had moments where I'm like, this is a shit show.
I got nothing. You better choose your guess wisely, my friend.
You never know until the end. I've had very famous authors just be like, I don't know how to do this.
Huh.
All right, brother. It was good talking to you. Thanks so much for your time, and I will absolutely see you at Thriller Fest.
All right. Good to see you again, Carter. Take
Take it
care.
easy. Bye.
Bye.
All right, that is it. That is my conversation with Gregg Hurwitz. That was a great storytelling. The words just flowed out of him. I loved it. It was almost challenging for me. I'm like, oh boy, he's it's fucking good at this. Yeah, that was just a fantastic conversation. I look forward to seeing him at Thriller Fest this year. If you want to find out all about Gregg's new book, the latest in the Orphan X series called Antihero, just check out his website at gregghurwitz.net. And then pop on over to carterwilson.com if you're interested in my books, more episodes of this podcast, my newsletter, all that good stuff. And if you are looking for any kind of writing coaching, pop on over to unboundwriter.com and see how I might be able to help you. Friends, that is it. That is it for this episode of Making It Up. Thanks as always for watching and or listening. Another episode out just next week. In the meantime, as always, take care.